Harrison the Hitman Smith had a career day on October 1st against the Carolina Panthers with 3 sacks and a forced fumble. Smith has been under the radar much of his career, but today we discuss whether he should be a Hall of Famer. Welcome back to No Buts About It. This is Josh. As you can see, my right eye or my left eye is still recovering over here. So I'm trying to record this in segments. I don't even know what day this is going to go up. I'm recording this on Thursday. Hopefully it goes up Thursday. But I'm doing what my body lets me as far as staying up and keeping the eye open. It's still kind of lazy over here. Anyway, today we're diving into the debate surrounding whether Harrison Smith should be allowed into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The 6-time Pro Bowler has been in the NFL since 2012. For reference, that is the same year guys like Russell Wilson and Andrew Luck and Kirk Cousins were drafted into the NFL. So he's been in there for a while and has shown no signs of slowing down this year. In fact, Harrison might have a career year this year, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Over that time, Harrison Smith has accumulated almost 1,000 tackles. He also has 19 and a half sacks along with 34 interceptions. Harrison is also ranked second in franchise history for DB solo tackles at 723. So I just said he's almost got 1,000 tackles. He's got about 200 and some assists. I think it's about 220 assisted tackles. But he has 720 solo tackles. That puts him right behind Chad Greenway, who had 761 for the Vikings. He is, however, the Vikings' record holder for sacks by a DB. He's also got a lot of sacks for his safety. There are currently only 36 defensive backs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. 18 of these people are safeties if you consider. It's weird because some of them primarily played cornerback, some of them primarily played safety, some of them were kind of in between. So I said 18 of them took most of their snaps at safety. That number is somewhat fluid, though, just because of the nature of the position. If you want to look at who those guys are, some of the people that were kind of hard were like Rod Woodson, who the website had as like everything on defense, so I didn't include him. But only 4 of these safeties that are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame have been drafted since 1990, and it's these guys. I would like to look at some of these Hall of Famers and see how does Harrison Smith's career actually compare to some of these guys over here. The 2 safeties that I have chosen to do this with are Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu over here. They're both argued to be 2 of the best safeties to play the game in the modern era. I remember both of them playing, and so I thought that this would be a good comparison to the game Harrison Smith was coming into, even though there have been nuances since. First, let's look at Ed Reed, who actually retired the same year that Harrison Smith was drafted in 2012. So I just realized this thing over here looks really creepy. That is a Halloween decoration of a bat. So don't freak out. Anyway, Ed Reed, he had 64 interceptions. That's a lot of interceptions. He had 541 solo tackles. He had 13 fumble recoveries and 6 sacks in a 12-year career. Reed also won Defensive Player of the Year in 2004 and was a 9-time Pro Bowler. Like I said before, Harrison Smith currently, as of the recording of this video, only has 6. He was also the Super Bowl 47 champion. That was the Super Bowl that they beat the 49ers. So definitely an interesting lineup here that we've got. Here's Ed Reed's stats over here. Compare that to Harrison Smith's stats of 34 interceptions, 723 solo tackles, 7 fumble recoveries, and 19 and a half sacks. I told you that was a lot for a safety. Now we can move on to Troy Polamalu. So let's get his stats up over here. Troy Polamalu, he was one of the best safeties at disguising himself in the defensive scheme, a lot of guys hated him because it seemed like he always was in the right place at the right time. Some people I've even heard in interviews, such as on the Pat McAfee show, they talk about how like God seemingly just told him what the play was going to be because he was always in the right place at the right time. And he tormented quarterbacks for 12 seasons on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Polamalu's stats: 32 interceptions, 583 solo tackles, 7 fumble recoveries, and 12 sacks. These numbers are a bit more, closer than what Ed Reed's were, but Ed Reed was known for playing in coverage. Ed Reed was arguably the best coverage safety to ever play in the NFL. So it kind of makes sense to why he didn't have as many sacks in his career, because they kept him back to guard receivers and stop the pass, basically. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It's not that hard. Polamalu was two-time Super Bowl champion with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He won Super Bowl 40 and 43 with them. He was also the 2010 Defensive Player of the Year and Walter Payton Man of the Year. The man with the luscious locks, he just couldn't be stopped. And so he's probably got the best argument against Harrison Smith as far as accolades go. However, Smith did have a similar impact on the game to Troy Polamalu and Ed Reed. Bill Belichick, arguably the greatest head coach of all time in the NFL. I'm kind of wondering now, though, was it all Brady? I don't know. Maybe we'll have to do another video about that. But in 2018, Patriots head coach Bill Belichick said this about Harrison Smith. This is a quote: "Harrison Smith does a great job with pre-snap disguise. He's one of the best, you know. Smith, Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu. Those guys are, I'd say, among the best. He's certainly up there. He's a hard guy to read." That is very high praise from Bill Belichick, comparing him to Troy Polamalu and Ed Reed and the way that he worked defenses. In 2021, Aaron Rodgers said on the Pat McAfee show that Smith was the hardest player to figure out what he was doing before the snap, and that is definitely high praise coming from a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback, arguably one of the greatest football minds that we've been able to see play in the last 20 years, up there with Brady. I know a lot of people don't like him, but you can't deny that he's a smart football dude. Harrison Smith's football intelligence is always on full display when you watch a Minnesota Vikings game. However, the most notable, in my opinion, and this is just coming from my memory, so maybe that's why it's so recent, this last week's game against the Carolina Panthers, he had 3 sacks as a safety. That's absolutely insane. And again, I've mentioned that Harrison Smith already has a ton of sacks for a safety, but to have 3 sacks in a game is big even for him, because that's as many as he's had in a season so far. So he's already tied his season total. So I completely expect for him to get 1 or 2 more sacks. We're only a quarter of the way through the season. I don't think he's going to have a 12-sack season, but Harrison Smith is on his way to having a career year. Now, the criteria for the Hall of Fame usually comes down to longevity, impact on the game, contributions, and accolades. I believe Smith has succeeded in being a consistent, long-tenured player. As we've said, he's been in the league since Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson. He's currently the longest tenured player on the Minnesota Vikings, so clearly he's been around for a long time. His impact on the game is also clear, as some of the greatest football minds in Rodgers and Belichick, as we just spoke about, are complimenting him. So clearly offenses are having to plan around Harrison the Hitman Smith. Accolades, though, is where I draw my concerns. He doesn't have a Super Bowl ring. He's been with the Minnesota Vikings his entire career. They have yet to win a Super Bowl. He also has never won Defensive Player of the Year, and I think this could be the difference between him being in the Hall of Fame and the Hall of Very Good. So Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu both completed Defensive Player of the Year and have Super Bowl rings. They've created those 2 accolades. In fact, Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu are 2 of only 5 safeties to ever win Defensive Player of the Year. Polamalu is the most recent to do it in 2010, so it's been 12 years now since someone has won Defensive Player of the Year. Definitely a long time. Someone that's a safety has won Defensive Player of the Year. I would like to see Smith either win a Super Bowl or get Defensive Player of the Year. I don't know that he's going to get Defensive Player of the Year, though, because so many other players are just doing so well. And it tends to be pass rushers that are favored in that, such as Nick Bosa, who just won it, guys like Aaron Donald, J.J. Watt. But if he could somehow get a Super Bowl ring, then he'd be set, I think, because that seems to be a main distinction thing. Like we saw with even Matthew Stafford, people were like, okay, he's not a Hall of Famer, he doesn't have a Super Bowl. Then all of a sudden, not a whole lot changes. He's playing a similar game to what he'd been playing in Detroit and LA, but he won a Super Bowl, and everyone was like, oh yeah, first ballot, easy. However, the counter argument to this is Smith has stats that are on par with Reed and Troy Polamalu, and in some cases his stats are better. Let me put those back up real quick. I'll put Ed and Troy over here, and then these are Harrison Smith's over here. He is at a positional disadvantage for Defensive Player of the Year, like I just mentioned, and the lack of Super Bowl is not entirely on Harrison Smith. That's a team achievement. So really, he's not at a great opportunity to get either of those awards, unless he goes to a different team. But he seemed pretty dedicated to the Minnesota Vikings. Harrison Smith's stats are right where they need to be compared to NFL greats. He's looked fantastic. He's flown under the radar, though, and some more casual football fans may even be unfamiliar with Harrison Smith if they're not Vikings fans or if they aren't regularly watching Vikings games, because he's not talked about a lot in the media. But I do think he is a fantastic player. Harrison does lack accolades and that the other Hall of Fame safeties have. This could possibly hold him back from getting into the Hall of Fame. It definitely holds him back from being a first ballot Hall of Famer, I think. Even though guys like J.J. Watt are definitely going to be Hall of Famer without a Super Bowl. That is a very hard thing to do. I believe that this lack of accolades, though, can be made up. It's his impressive stats and impact on the game. He's played in, but some voters may disagree with me. I don't have the Hall of Fame vote. There would be different guys in the Hall of Fame if I had a Hall of Fame vote, but I don't. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, I believe Harrison Smith will eventually be in the Hall of Fame, but it could be a while before he gets in. There are still defensive players that I'm amazed haven't gotten in, such as Dwight Freeney, Robert Mathis, and Clay Matthews Jr. That's the Packers' Clay Matthews' dad, not the Packers' Clay Matthews. We're talking about his dad. So it's been a while since he's been able to get into the Hall of Fame. Clay Matthews III is not yet eligible. If Smith can get a Super Bowl ring or Defensive Player of the Year award, then I think his chances exponentially improve, and he would probably end up being a first ballot Hall of Famer because of that. But I just don't see either of those things happening right now as of the recording of this video. He's one of the most underappreciated players in the NFL, though, and I would love to see him get more credit. What do you think? Do you think Harrison Smith is a Hall of Famer? Do you think he gets the credit he's due? Let me know in the comments, and if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. And until next time, go do something nice for someone.